Well, hello, and welcome everyone to our Shriver Hangout for October 2015. My name is Amanda Moore, and I'm the Director of Online Content and Communities at the Sargent Shriver National Center on Poverty Law. I have two guests with me today, and I'm very excited to talk to them. I have Richard Mark Antonio and Sam Tepperman Gelfont. They are attorneys at Public Advocates in San Francisco, and they're joining us today from San Francisco. Oh, hi, Richard, and hi, Sam.
Good morning. Good morning, Amanda.
Nice to see you. Um, we are going to have a conversation today about their work and about their article. They are the authors of our Clearinghouse article for October. It's called Seizing the Power of Public Participation. And it's a really great piece. I'm excited to talk with them about it. But before we get into that, I want to let you know how you can be part of this conversation. We would love to hear from you. We want to hear your questions. If you have war stories or comments, we would love to hear all of that. So there are two ways you can let us hear from you while we are talking. One is if you are watching through your Google Plus account, through the Google Hangout itself, what you can do is hover your mouse over the left side of your screen, and you'll see a toolbar pop up. One of those icons is a blue, sort of a dialog box, and it says Q&A in it. Go ahead and click that, and a chat box will open down the right side of your screen. And you'll be able to send us questions that way. And don't worry, you won't appear on camera, anything like that. But we will see your questions, and we'll be able to answer those. If you want to go ahead and give that a try now, make sure it's working, that'd be fine. You can just send us your name and where you're watching, and we would love to hear from you. Now, I know some of you are watching the live stream of this broadcast through the Shriver Center's YouTube channel, but never fear, we have a way to hear from you too. If you want to tweet at us, that would be great. You can use this hashtag, Shriver Hangout, tweet to us at Shriver Center, and we would like to hear from you that way as well. Feel free to go ahead and do that at any point. I'll be monitoring our Twitter stream while we talk. All right, well, now I want to get to the business at hand, which is talking with Richard and Sam about their community lawyering work in Northern California and this article about public participation. I found this one personally really interesting. I used to represent community groups in Appalachian, Kentucky, and we often found ourselves at public hearings or writing public comments. And I could see that there is great potential there, but maybe it's not always approached in a super thoughtful way. And that's what Richard and Sam want to talk to us about, is how we can really make that a powerful experience for our clients and for community groups. So Sam, I'll start with you. The title of this article, Seizing the Power of Public Participation, the title itself implies that maybe we aren't taking full advantage of these public participation processes, public hearings, public comment opportunities. So, I mean, why isn't it enough that we just, that our clients just have an opportunity to make these comments or, give a 2-minute comment at a public hearing? Why is that not enough?
Well, I think that we really highlighted power because the point is not just to allow people to speak, but actually to have that speech and participation change outcomes and change outcomes of decisions and change how decisions are being made. And so there are a lot of features about that 2-minute public comment period that you identified that make it almost impossible to either change the outcomes of decisions or change the process if that's the little tiny box that people are being required to fit into. And so just to name a few of them, I think that fragmentation of people's voices and community voices is a big problem with that chopped up, segmented format, that if a bunch of well-meaning people turn out to a meeting and each one gets up and says something disconnected, it's very easy for decision makers to either ignore or cherry pick the things that they want to hear. And that's a real problem for the substance of decisions. I think from a power building standpoint, that doesn't, without a lot of work outside of the meetings, create the power base in the community of bringing people together that is required to actually exercise political leverage or legal leverage. Um, and I think there's also sort of hidden problems with that, which is that often even those meetings where there are comment periods are at the wrong place in the process. So they're happening too early before any serious decisions are being made, or then they happen at the end when everything is water under the bridge and nothing can really be changed. So I think that there's an illusion that you could turn out and speak, but in fact, the way the system is set up is really designed to make sure that that public input and those comments don't actually influence the course of the decision. And then, of course, I think we're always struggling with accessibility barriers to public meetings in terms of time of day, language, location. And I think those are really important, but I think it's key from the power standpoint to have a deeper analysis of where that whole format is falling down, and not just try to gain the access to a shallow opportunity to speak and be heard.
So, Richard, what do we as community lawyers, what do we need to do to leverage these opportunities into something that will actually build this power and achieve some sort of concrete result?
Well, Amanda, we didn't set out to answer that question comprehensively, but we did identify 3 strategies that are responsive to the kinds of challenges that Sam just identified. So one of those strategies, well, I'll just name them all 3 first. First, to really to bring together a coalition around a shared platform of asks, around a shared agenda. What are we trying to get out of this process? How are we trying to shift the outcome? Second, to pay attention to the process itself, because as Sam said, the process, in most cases, in my experience, is not set up in a way that is even amenable to achieving the kind of changes that low-income communities and residents really want to see. And then finally, to think about the kinds of inside strategies and outside strategies and a combination that's the right set of strategies, or really the right set of tactics to make those changes. So just to say a little bit about each of those, the antidote to a number of things that Sam talked about as challenges, that is particularly the isolation of individual commenters, but also, it is to bring people together and really deliberate about what their needs are, what their priorities are, what are the things they want to see happen within this particular decision-making process. How are they going to go about doing that, and actually coming to a shared perspective on that? What we've found is it not only is overcoming that cherry picking and isolation kind of issue that Sam highlighted, but actually in some of the work that we talk about in this, the campaign work we talk about in this article, we really came to appreciate the wisdom that comes out when neighbors in low-income communities are sitting down together and outside of the public process, outside of the 2-minute comment period, are sitting down together beforehand and sharing their thoughts and building off of each other, and having lawyers and other people who bring other kinds of expertise to the expertise that the community members have. And something really rich comes out of that. In fact, so rich that in the campaign work, we were really impressed to see that ideas and policy asks that really were intended to benefit disadvantaged communities themselves turned out to have benefits for a whole wider set of stakeholders. So that's the shared policy platform. It's a very powerful thing, but then you need to be able to get that into the process, and the process is not 9 times out of 10 or more. It's not going to be designed to accommodate that kind of that kind of intervention. Really, I mean, we're talking about not coming to the public process and saying, yes, we like this proposal, or no, we don't like that proposal. We're talking about coming in and saying, here's a whole new proposal. right? So that's a very powerful thing. It's but it really requires a focus on the process. And as lawyers, we have a real, I think, we're trained to look at process. And the thing that's interesting to me about, in litigation, the process is pretty much, you got to color within those lines. In local public agency decision making, that's not the case. The process rules are pretty much, made up as staff goes along, as the city council goes along, within the bounds of some general, state law and federal requirements, as the case may be. So there's a lot of room, really, to propose changes in the process, and that's something we talk about in the article and give some examples of that. And then finally, when the community has come together around a shared set of priorities and solutions that they want to push together in this public process, then there's the opportunity to actually to cultivate agency staff by meetings with staff, to go to decision makers themselves, the board members, the city council members, whoever that may be, and bring stories, personal stories that residents can really comfortably and actually with a lot of power speak to, but bringing those stories forward in a way that's connected to this larger framework that the community is agreeing to and wants to move. So there's that ability to move inside strategies in that way. And we've actually been surprised to see that in these meetings with decision makers, it's not just sort of your champions on the decision-making board who you're going to meet with. You're going to meet with the people who normally are not so interested in the issues that low-income residents are bringing forward. But now you've got something that we've just found that there's the ability to make that human connection, and that there's actually an appreciation at the agency or city level to actually know that there is a unified, call it a social equity voice in this process. They don't have to try to figure out what the community wants. The community is there to tell them. So we found that these inside meetings, these inside strategies are very effective. At the same time, just to give one example of an outside strategy, the fact that the community developed solutions, may often be better for the city or whatever the geography is as a whole, provides an opportunity to meet with other stakeholders in the process. Maybe they're environmentalists, maybe it's labor, it could be a whole range of stakeholders, and some pretty surprising ones, as we talk about in the article sometimes. And to be able to say to them, not only, hey, can you support us on this, but hey, we're asking for this, and this is also meeting your objectives. And that can be very powerful.
Well, you mentioned your article a few times, and I want to remind our viewers that everyone who registered for today's Hangout will get a follow-up email within the next few days, and in it you will get a link to read Richard and Sam's article. If you can't wait that long, I understand. You can go to the URL here, which is povertylaw.org/clearinghouse, and you'll find a link to their article there as well. It's completely free to read. You will need to register on the site if you don't already have a login. But it's great. All the things they're talking about, they go into more detail about in the article, so I highly recommend it. I also want to remind people who have joined us in the past few minutes that we would love to hear from you. If you're watching through the Google Hangout, you can hover your mouse on the left side of your screen and click on that blue Q&A icon, and you'll get a chat box open up, and you can send us questions, comments, stories. That way, we would love to hear from you. If you're watching through YouTube and the Shriver Center's channel there, you can tweet to us here. You can use the hashtag Shriver Hangout or tweet to us at Shriver Center. We would love to hear from you. Richard, I want to stick with you for a minute. This is a really thoughtful process to the process, and I'm wondering how you arrived at this approach? Did you have a lot of trial and error? Was there some sort of organizing philosophy that was underlying this? How did you come about thinking about public participation processes in this way?
You know, when I was about almost 20 years ago, when I was a legal aid attorney, I had an experience that I'll say a little bit about that for me was a real eye-opener and you know led me in this path. Public advocates has been doing work like this independently that I wasn't necessarily part of at that time. But for me, as a legal aid lawyer, and this was not in the context of an existing public process, but you know, I was in our legal aid office. We had a lot of homeless clients with a range of issues, and one that kept coming up over and over again was police harassment. This was in a small suburban county, and you know, and it was very frustrating. There was very little in terms of legal tools that we had, and finally we started looking at the Americans with Disabilities Act, and then that opened up the idea of, you know what, we have connections with a lot of, you know, with homeless service providers, with housing providers, with a bunch of different groups that have an interest in homeless issues. Let me go talk to each of them one-on-one and find out what issues are they concerned with, what are they seeing, what solutions do they have in mind. And so I had this very informative set of meetings, mostly with people I already had relationships with, but then I would ask them, and who else should I be talking to? And well, you should talk to the, you know, the Alliance for the Mentally Ill, you know, a group of parents with mentally ill children, and so on. And out of all those conversations, I was hearing some, you know, similar themes, and I thought, you know what, let me bring those folks together in a meeting. And I said, here's what I've been hearing. What do folks think if we talk together about some solutions? And anyway, that was a very powerful thing for me. And it also, you know, we got the attention of high up, a captain at the police department. He said, if there's a problem, we want to sit down and talk about it. And things went from there. But so there were no community organizers at the table in that particular example. But there were people with constituencies or with, you know, with clients like we had who knew the issues and could come together to thoughtfully identify solutions once we knew that there was a shared interest.
Sam, I'm wondering how our viewers, many of whom are legal aid attorneys, as you were at that time, Richard, if they do work with community groups, how do they begin to change the way that they're approaching public hearings or these sorts of relationships with local government officials if they are finding them to be fruitless or frustrating? Do they need to have an organizer as a partner? It sounded like you didn't, Richard, but you may have some of those skills just on your own. Sam, how would someone go about doing this?
Yeah, so I think that one of the themes that Richard was talking about in the solutions, which is sort of obvious, is that a lot of working conversations have to happen outside of and before there's engagement in an official public process or an informal, you know, sort of outside the official process advocacy. So I think figuring out what the mechanisms are in any given local community around an issue to have those conversations on the community side in a really engaged and real way is key. And so I would say that, you know, if you are in an area where there are groups that think of themselves as organizing groups or organizers, that's a fantastic resource. And I think that that can be, you know, jumpstart the process a lot because there are already a lot of the groundwork has been laid. But, you know, I would say, Richard, in the example that you just gave, you know, I don't know if you were working with folks who self-identified as organizers, but there were certainly people who were doing organizing who you could find in community leaders or in, it could be in church groups or in service organizations or, people receiving service or support from a direct services group. And so there are going to be configurations in any community where the people who have an interest in your given issue are already organizing themselves. And so, I think that I would say it's scary to think about as an attorney sort of what skill sets are needed to do that. And I also would say that there are limitations to how much we as lawyers can go out and do direct organizing ourselves. But I think that it's really about thinking creatively about where are the folks who you're trying to assist in getting a greater voice and more power in a public process. How are they already coming together? And then how can you reach out in a way that really communicates and demystifies how a decision-making process or a legal process or whatever you're trying to engage in can help advance their interests, intersects with the conversations that they're already having. And I think that's the starting point. And so I would just say that the examples that we talk about in the article are about a Bay Area-wide regional coalition and a large-scale multi-sector Navy base redevelopment plan. Those are pretty complex and high level, and we were able to do that in the Bay Area because of a long history that Public Advocates has and that actually community groups have of coming together around smaller scale campaigns and issues to build those relationships and those skills with each other. So I guess I just wanted to be sure that we sort of weren't selling some, Bay Area pipe dream that, maybe it would be great to get there at some point, but, that's just so far away from where most of our advocacy is in other parts of the country, and just say that it's really a bit by bit accumulation, and those relationships are key to build, and going to people where they are is really the key to building them, I think.
That's a great segue to the question I wanted to ask. And I was having the same thought. I'm in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and used to practice in Appalachian, Kentucky. And so sometimes when we hear things, in the Bay Area, we think, wow, that must be nice. But I like that you're saying it's not just limited to this, that it is a feasible thing. And so, the work that you did, the work that you detail, the two groups that you talk about and the campaigns that you talk about in the article were really large. And so I can imagine some of our viewers thinking, I've got cases, I just don't have time for that. And so, Richard, is this work, is it prohibitively consuming for an attorney who also has, clients and cases all the time? And, Sam, I think you were getting at that by saying you can take this in smaller pieces. Does that work all the time? Can you really sort of do this in a small amounts?
Yeah, I mean, at our legal aid office, we made a decision that we wanted to carve out, everybody wanted to have some time carved out on their plate from the day-to-day caseload for some kind of impact level work. And you do need to carve out the time. You can't be doing this with a full caseload and running into court every day, obviously. But you can carve out some time, and it doesn't need to be prohibitive. And even even here in the Bay Area, we have had experiences of working with coalitions where people couldn't come together around a sort of a comprehensive platform that they really agreed on and were going to work together on. And that in my experience, that indicates that we're trying to set our sights too high for where we are right now, and we need to start with something smaller where there is agreement. So it's as Sam said, the relationships are really what's key. And what I think legal aid lawyers really do have a great advantage with respect to this work is that we're in the community for the long haul. We're not coming in and then running to the next place, and that's a real advantage for building long-term relationships of trust. And then, and then we didn't talk in the article about this, but we are also participating in some statewide coalitions where people with very different issue priorities have come together, and because of all the groundwork that's been laid, really able to carry each other's issue priorities, which is really an amazing thing to me. But again, that takes, building the trust campaign by campaign and starting where you are.
Well, I think what you just made was a pitch for affirmative advocacy, which is something that at the Shriver Center we really promote. That, sometimes that needs to come from the top of the organization in the legal aid program to say this is a priority for us. We're not just going to respond to clients and their problems. We're going to take a break, as you said, and carve out some time to look at what sort of advocacy we could do that could affect a broader population. And I think you made a very eloquent pitch for that. I want to remind our viewers that we are coming close to the end of our half hour. It always seems to fly by. If you have a question for Richard or Sam, please go ahead and send that to us now so we can get to it before we wrap up. You can send that to us through the chat box on the Google Hangout. That's the Q&A app you'll find on the left side of your screen. Or you can tweet to us at Shriver Center. You can use the hashtag Shriver Hangout, and we'll get those questions. Do either of you have any resources to recommend? Obviously, there's your article, which we all want to recommend right now because it's a great resource. But if there's an attorney who's thinking more about community lawyering, this more taking this thoughtful approach to public participation, do you have resources to recommend to them?
I mean, one resource that I want to recommend and really believe in is not sort of in the format of an article, but is in peer-to-peer communications. We're talking about organizing, we're talking about relationship development, and there's nothing as helpful, I think, as being able to have a conversation with another attorney or with an organizer who's engaged in the campaign, even if it's in a really different environment, about how they approached it, what some of the challenges were, what their assessment would be of where, my starting point is. And so I guess I sort of feel like being aware even of like news stories that you see in the media or, things that you hear at panels at conferences or that kind of thing, and really just picking up the phone or email and directly reaching out. And I think that people who are engaged in this work are generally very generous with their time and, want to help. And they're not going to come in and run your campaign for you. But having those key conversations at key moments, I found to be extremely valuable. And so I feel like that's, it takes a little bit more effort than saying, okay, just read these 5 things, but in the end can really get you to where you need to go a lot quicker.
So yeah. I'll just real quick, Richard, I want to put Sam on the spot. Does that mean that our viewers can contact you to talk about this?
It would be great to hear from folks who want to do things similar to what we're talking about in our article. And I know there are folks on this Hangout who I was in conversation with last week. And so, yeah, I think that would be great. And if we're not the folks who have expertise or experience on your particular issue, I think we have relationships with a lot of advocates throughout the country at this point who have engaged in similar kind of campaign work and, might be able to connect you with people.
Well, thanks. That's really a large part of why we have these Hangouts, is to sort of facilitate that type of networking. So when everyone who's viewing this, when you do get this email, it will include contact information for Sam and Richard. And Richard, I'm sorry I cut you off. So what are your recommended resources?
I was just going to add a plug for the Policy Link National Equity Summit. It's in Los Angeles next week. I don't know if they do that every year, but it's, just like going to an NLADA conference is a great place to have that peer learning with lawyers. I think the Policy Link Summit is a great place to, or events like that, is a great place for legal aid lawyers to come into contact with folks from around the country who are doing organizing and other coalition and policy advocacy.
That's a great a great organization, and I know you said you will be there next week, so I look forward to it. And someone from the Shriver Center will be there as well. I look forward to hearing how that goes. Well, we have reached the end of our half hour. I have so enjoyed talking with you and listening to your wisdom, Richard and Sam. So thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Sure. And I want to say to our viewers again, you'll get the follow-up email. It will have a link so you can watch the recording of this again. It will have their contact information. It will have a link where you can find this article where they talk in more detail about the work that they've done in Northern California. And I want to make a plug for our hangout next month. I hope you'll come back and join us again on Thursday, November 19th at the same time as today, 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Pacific. I'll be talking with Sharon Dietrich. She is at Community Legal Services in Philadelphia, and we're going to be talking about background screeners and expunged records, and somehow at times how those records don't seem to want to die, and what you can do about that for your clients. It should be a really interesting conversation. She's doing some great stuff. There will also be a link in that email that you get to where you can go ahead and register for next month's hangout. So again, thank you so much to Richard and Sam for your time and for your article, and thanks to all of you for joining us today, and I hope I'll have the chance to hang out with you again next month. Thanks.